Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. It is draft day, and who better to get you ready to find out what the Lakers will, should, can, might do than Mike Garcia. You know him as Canyon Driver on social. We have him. He's going to break it all down next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom are wondering what exactly the Lakers are going to do here on draft day. Are they going to trade the pick, keep the pick? If they keep it, who are they going to use it on? Who should they use it on? Who are these people that are out there floating around? Because I really have never seen most of them play. And I think in that I have a lot in common with many NBA fans. So to help
and your co-host.
Yeah, well, I think that goes without saying. Do want to let people know that today's episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. You know him at Canyon Driver on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Lakers draft scouting on Substack. So it's draft day. You've done all of this work. Like, what if you were in charge of what the Lakers do here, like setting aside, what you think will happen, could happen, or whatever, what would you do? How would you approach this day, keeping the pick? What kind of players are you looking for? Just what would be kind of your roadmap?
So I would keep in mind any potential trades. I have a rough idea of how I'd like to shore up the front line. I would like to put Anthony Davis in a position where he doesn't just always have to play center. I would like to have additional wings, preferably guys that can shoot. I would preferably like to find guys in trade that I could trust to defend at a playoff level. If none of those trades are available, then I'm looking to the draft. That's where I would have a set list of players in relative draft order. So when guys get picked up one by one, I just look to the top of the list. Oh, this is the guy we looked at. We want him. We like how the interview went. The workouts went well. We're going to be happy with them. And then we can proceed with further roster construction after that.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about this, Mike, being a really weak draft class in terms of superstar future talent. But from the Lakers' perspective, that doesn't really matter because at 17, you're not drafting from a slot where you would reasonably expect to get a star. It can happen. It has happened before. But from their perspective, the idea is, if you're playing the odds, you're looking to try to find a legit NBA player, like a rotation player, preferably somebody who can play some minutes right now. With that as, I think, the sensible goal for the Lakers, assuming they keep this pick, do you think the draft actually offers worthwhile opportunities along those lines?
So I understand how the draft is being perceived and that there's no obvious star at the top. But from what I've kind of observed throughout this entire season is the idea of a typical late first round pick is 20 spaces out. So, for example, if I'm looking at a late first rounder and it was an average draft, okay, maybe it's only 5 to 10 slots of guys that I would think fit that tier of player. But for this particular season, it's more like right around that mid first. So around pick 15 to say pick 30 to 35. They're all generally that same tier of player. It's kind of dependent on what each team prioritizes in terms of development versus, wanting someone more NBA ready. So there's a lot to pick from in terms of the Lakers' choices.
When people talk about NBA ready, what does that mean exactly? Is it the idea that a guy can come in and, play 26, 28, 30 minutes a night, whatever it might be, or is it a matter of having a certain set of skills, a sort of what exactly does it mean to be NBA ready?
So my interpretation of that is basically being able to play 1 or 2 shifts a game. And you play 16 minutes and not put the team at such a severe deficit when you're at a lineup. What that entails is usually a level of awareness on both ends of the floor. You're not going to fall asleep on defense. You're aware of, oh, this is my matchup. This is how I need to defend this guy. This is what the next guy looks like. I'm going to be ready to switch onto him. And then on top of that, it's a level of physicality. Going from college level to the NBA level, it's just a huge jump, not just in terms of athletic ability and bigger players, but just willing to compete physically. I'm going to box out this guy. I'm going to compete on this shot. And when you can find guys, regardless of age, whether they're 18 or even 25, as long as they're able to do those things, that's my idea of what NBA readiness looks like.
And so, like, just sorry, but like to go kind of backwards a little bit, like you contextualize this, because I find this part of it really interesting in terms of figuring out like the skill sets that allow players to play. If I remember correctly, you were not a Hood-Schifino fan going into the draft last year.
Not as much. I had my priority picks.
Yeah. So what made it? I mean, even before he got hurt, it was pretty clear he was not NBA ready. So to use that example, like what didn't he have? Like what was he missing from that formula you're talking about?
So in his specific context, he was going from becoming a shooting guard to a point guard. So that's already a huge jump in development. There's a lot that point guards are in charge of in terms of ball distribution, controlling of the tempo, other factors similar to that. And for Indiana, they played him in a lot of those shooting guard sets where, okay, dribble handoff, come off a screen, take the shot. The upside to Jalen Hood-Schifino was, oh, he sees the defensive coverage. He can find the open man at the farthest corner, and that's a huge advantage for any guard in general. So there's the idea that, oh, he can project to be a future big point guard because, look, we put him in this action, he can make this read. Now look at what he can do. Sometimes I think that's too big of a jump to go from shooting guard to point guard and then going to the next level at the NBA level. So it might just take some time for him. But if I would like to see him become more confident and be familiar with the play sets that he's familiar with. And then if that's the case, then make him a rotation player and then build upon that. That'd be great.
Every year we hear pundits talking about, people, draft experts, stuff like that, talking about how an incoming class is really strong, pretty meh, like whatever. On the whole, how good do you think the analysts are at predicting this stuff? And like what makes it either, do you think, relatively easy to predict or actually pretty difficult to predict?
So this particular class is especially difficult to predict. I've seen a lot of draft ranges from guys projected in lottery where usually, oh, if I see a guy that's a number one pick, maybe he doesn't go farther down than 4. But the guy I have number 1 might go all the way down to the mid first round, which is unheard of. And it's not just him, it's quite a few projected players with these 15 slot ranges, which makes this draft really unpredictable. I think they're really good at looking at the star power at the very top. But then when things get to that mid first round, all the way to that mid second round, sometimes where there's a lot of quality role players, especially in this particular draft, it's that much more of a challenge to see, oh, well, maybe we could find star power here, maybe. But in this particular draft, you're looking at guys that can make rotations and contribute and possibly even at a playoff level down the line.
The flip side of that, of not having that like super like sure thing candidates, are there actually more options, do you think, of players who, if you scout it right, if you scout for the right skill sets and match a player to your program in the right way, actually could pan out better at 17 than you would normally expect?
There's a team context to this. I do think certain teams are better at player development. It really leans down to leaning into a certain team's strengths and then how they further develop players. I know it's a big thing about Jaime Jaquez going to Miami, but at the same time, Miami does really well with undrafted free agent players. I know Nikola Jovic did a huge leap in development and was a playoff contributor in the Eastern Conference this year. That kind of player development is really hard to find. So if I was that team, I might take a risk on a certain player that might have that higher projected upside. So that's what kind of leans into the whole idea of it.
Well, when you talk about team context, obviously the Lakers are a roster that's in reform with a coach that's was introduced this week. And I'm interested to find out Mike, what you think the new coach has to do with any of these things, what skill sets the Lakers could be looking for. So we'll get to that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. It's also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what it is you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
Okay, so what could be revealed? Like, what do you think we will learn about Redick and the new program? Obviously, he had a press conference on Monday and things like that, but not a lot of time. Like, this is the first really tangible example, perhaps, of how a player fits into what JJ Redick wants to do philosophically, offensively, defensively, whatever it might be. What kind of player, based on what we know about him, do you think makes sense?
So when JJ Redick got hired, one of the first things I thought about was, I don't know his roster philosophy or team philosophy or offensive scheme. I just have a general idea that he's going to open things up for shooters because that's been his career track.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, that means finding bigs that can shoot, but not just shoot, screen well, be able to pass, and maybe attack off the dribble if the opportunity presents itself. If it's not that kind of big man, then it's definitely a wing or a guard that has some sort of ability to tilt the defense with rim pressure, or at least provide that perimeter gravity as well.
In a perfect world for the Lakers, like, I guess this piggybacks a little bit onto what you're talking about, but do you think they should be targeting in terms of actual position, or do you think at 17 it just becomes best player available, position be damned? Like, would you take another point guard even though they just drafted JHS, acknowledging you're not a big fan of him to begin with?
I would definitely go with best player available. There's a lot of rare skill sets that are to be found with players that are falling down in the middle of this draft. For example, Isaiah Collier, as I mentioned to you earlier, that he gets 4 points a game just in transition points alone. There's a lot of things that you can't teach when he's passing off the dribble and he's able to push that kind of pace. That's a rare skill set. There's no real offensive playbook that, expands upon that really. And that's the kind of thing that helps shift the team to get to a higher level. But in this particular case, if none of those star players like maybe Ron Holland or Isaiah Collier fall down, then there are roughly three guys of three different positions that happen to fall to 17, and they can all be technically the best player available for the Lakers.
Is that how this is, I guess, where the challenge of the draft comes in, and why I think what Andy's getting to in terms of like best available versus positional need, especially a team like the Lakers. This roster, D'Lo stays, D'Lo goes. Like, are you trading Rui Hachimura or aren't you? Like, if you do trade Rui, is it for another point guard, DeJounte Murray? Like, it feels to me like they are more likely to need more help in the front court. I don't really care what they do. It's like unlikely. It seems like they're going to trade for a big center, I guess, unless like Valanciunas or something like that somehow springs available. Are there spots that you think are safer, where like you're pretty much, there's almost a guaranteed need or a better avenue towards getting this guy versatility wise or something on the floor faster, somebody who can be able to help you with a skill set? Is that generally going to be found in wings and maybe bigs?
For this particular draft, I found it in at least one big and one wing player. I've highlighted it on my Twitter account before. I'll mention a couple names. DeRon Holmes is a big that I'm a fan of, and he's the kind of player that understands switching on defense, drop coverage on defense, but then on the offensive end, he plays from the high post, he plays from the low post, he makes reads and makes corresponding passes to open shooters. That's the kind of thing that I think JJ Redick would actually look forward to, because he can technically expand the playbook a little bit by adding at least one more functional decision maker on the floor. If the ball isn't in LeBron's hands and someone else has to make a decision, can he make the next pass to find the open shot? And that's one player that represents that as a 4-5 or 5-4 big. Tristan de Silva is another wing type where he operates more in motion, but he's a 40% shooter behind the arc back-to-back years. He's been 45% all other two-point ranges outside of the rim back-to-back years. And he operates within those curling off of cuts, whatever else it might be, even just spotting up. He doesn't need a lot of usage. And yet, if the shot is covered, he can make the next corresponding pass to the next open shooter. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for in terms of, okay, this is a version of a best player available. It will work for almost any system, regardless of the coach. And that's what I think the Lakers would prioritize.
All right, well, you led to where I want to go, Mike, right now, which is the names. Everyone wants to start getting the scouting reports on different guys that have been mocked to the Lakers or mocked roughly in the same area. De Silva is actually a guy that I've seen on probably the guy I've seen most commonly mocked to the Lakers, like ESPN had him there. I believe USA Today. You talked a little bit about De Silva's shooting. Defensively, do you think he can hold up to where he can play real minutes for the team next year? And I've also seen him described with a fair amount of versatility. Do you think that's correct?
I definitely agree with the versatility. He's been placed on different spots on the floor defensively, whether it's a point of attack at the top of a zone. He's chased shooters at the college level, and then he's been placed where he has to defend the post against other power forwards. I don't think he necessarily has the strength to be a full-time four, but just having a player that's experienced in defending different areas of the floor and just being able to be either adequate or not put a team at a severe deficit is a huge helpful thing from the jump. One of the key things to his offensive versatility is he's comfortable on and off the ball. He's comfortable spotting up. He's comfortable coming off of a slight motion for a shot, and I think he just has enough physicality to attack the rim. It's just about getting strength at the NBA level, and that's what tends to happen for all rookies across the board. So in terms of man defense, maybe he could be more physical, but I also look for the team defensive side where he's not missing a rotation. If he sees someone attacking the basket, he'll help out. He will, deflect in the passing lane, whatever else it might be. That kind of off-ball defense is hard to find, especially out of a rookie.
It sounds like you think he actually could play some minutes next year if the Lakers did take him.
Absolutely. For one of those things that I look for in terms of NBA readiness, it was kind of one of those things where he checked a lot of boxes across the board. Now it's just, okay, he's maybe just under 220 pounds. Can we get him to 230 or can we get him to 240 in a couple of years? Because if that's the case, I'm thinking, I think he might be a future starter now. So that's a great kind of projection on his behalf.
All right, let's take a quick break. And then when we get back, I want to get to another name that, if it's not De Silva, I'm probably seeing most mocked to the Lakers. A very big name, literally and figuratively. We'll get to him coming up next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports, and we love them so much, we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down in different leagues, you get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you, lets me, lets everyone keep the sports going whenever you want. And all you got to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime you're in the mood, and there's options. Baseball, WNBA, whatever your mind can concoct. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. So there's something for everyone all day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the MLB. All right. So Zach Edey, the huge center from Purdue, 7'4", 300. I've seen him come up on a few mocks to the Lakers. The consensus I'm seeing on him is kind of mixed. What is your take on Edey? And if he slipped to 17, you'd mentioned Deron Holmes before. I want to get a little bit more into him later as far as a big-ish type. I mean, he's not as big as Edey, but few people are. Like, what would be your thoughts on Edey if he actually was available for the Lakers?
I think Edie would be a very interesting pick. He's one of those big basketball players that just so happens to play a lot of minutes at the NCAA level. I don't have questions about his motor, which is one of those things you worry about when you're carrying that much size and weight going up and down the floor. He runs willingly, he rebounds, and he's aggressive in the paint, and he has soft touch up to about 10 feet. I do have some questions about his defensive ability, especially towards the perimeter. But in terms of a guy that has a simple role, and I've likened him to like a Zubats type of role early on, where just rebound, just cut to the rim, just set good screens, just finish around the rim. If the role is that simple, I think there's a big chance for him to excel, especially early on.
Do you think he and AD could play together if needed?
I would definitely give it a shot. At some point, there's going to be, man, I'm trying to calculate wingspan in my head, but if you're taking one arm of each player, 50 feet of
lot of arm,
right? It's like half a used car dealership in the front. Then there's going to be deflections on passes and blocks, and there's some sort of defensive intimidation all at the same time. I can imagine AD roaming out to the perimeter a little bit, just AD being around the key. How do you get around that? The ball's got to go to another spot. And if you can keep it moving for 24 seconds, it's over.
Can you
can
you compare Edie to another guy who was mocked particularly earlier? I think when the draft order was set is Filipkowski from Duke. How does Edie compare to Filipkowski?
So Edie has been utilized in that Shaq-like role where he goes specifically in the post and operates on that low block. He's not really operating at the elbows or from the perimeter in any kind of sense, unless he's setting screens for shooters, which he's actually very, very good at. Filipkowski is more of a versatile, modern NBA type where he's a triple threat big. He can pass, he can shoot, he can dribble, he can operate out of the high post, he screens just a little bit, and he has a high floor level of things that he can do on the floor. It's just a matter of where do you place him on the floor to make him effective and then make the lineup that he works with even more effective than where he is. To me, Filipkowski is very much that glue piece. So if you want to put him in pick and roll situations, he's pretty good at that. If you leave him open for three, I think he was about 35-36% last year. He's pretty good at that. It's just a matter of, okay, can we get him to gel in well with, in this case, LeBron and AD as that glue piece altogether?
It sort of sounds like, in terms of a variety of skill sets, does a lot of things well, not necessarily a superstar, but just a solid player. It's like a rich man's Castleton.
I mean, if Castleton keeps working on his strength and then adds to his dribble handoff ability and then his floater, who knows?
Maybe you don't need both.
One more big before I want to hear a little bit more about Deron Holmes, because I've seen him coming up a lot. Apologies to him if I'm mispronouncing his name. Yves Missi from Baylor. Seen him described as like a really, really good lob threat, really springy, really bouncy, but he's young. What are your impressions of him, and do you think he is somebody that actually could get minutes this coming season if the Lakers did take him?
So in terms of Missi, what I like most about his game is even though he's still early on to basketball, I think he really caught on mid high school. He has an incredible motor, and motor is something you can't really teach. People have it or they don't, and it really shows at the NBA level. So when I see Missi, he's always attacking the glass. He's always trying to finish a play. He's trying everything he can within his skill set. Unfortunately, skill set I think is a little bit raw, so I'm not sure if he can get that playing time early on. Sometimes it shows off in terms of foul trouble on the defensive end, but he's been likened to someone like Clint Capella, who's had similar criticisms before, and Capella ended up this decade-long, solid, high-level NBA rotation player. That's kind of what I'm thinking of in terms of Missi.
Nobody's expecting the Lakers to use the 17 pick on Bronny James, and nor should they. And it's not good for Bronny. It wouldn't be good for the Lakers. Wouldn't be good for LeBron. But as you get into the second round, that certainly becomes a bigger possibility. And the expectation from a lot of people, I think, is if he's there at 55, the Lakers would take him. Before we get into some of that, and whatever, what do you think of him as a prospect? Just irrespective of all the Lakers stuff and the politics and all of that around it.
So throughout the past year, I've generally ranked him in the mid first to late first. That's kind of where I've had him in general.
Boy, that is outside the norm.
It is, and I've been watching him since high school. So there are a lot of things about his game that I thought, well, he's playing like a college player, but he's at a high school level. A high school level team can't take advantage of this high advanced pass and always hit this corner three. And then he's this really athletic guard. What else can he do on the floor? So when I'm coming from that base level of observation, it's more about, well, what happens later? Does he develop on a team? Does something happen to him? Whatever else it might be. Considering the context that he dealt with the last year, I think he already dealt with a lot of having cardiac surgery, whatever else it might be. I think he did a solid job, but the real hope is really how he turned out in the combine, where his 3-point shooting was really evident and he was just steady all throughout. And then the athletic testing showed for itself. And then the second game of the draft scrimmage, he started to show out a little bit and showed more aggression to the hoop and in terms of jump shooting and some of that defensive ability. So he's really a good player. It's just a matter of, okay, how do we develop him? What does it look like? Let's make sure he's healthy, and then he can become the guy who he wants to be.
If he weren't LeBron's son, do you think the consensus on him or just the general impressions of him would be different? Like, forget good or bad, but just different entirely if he wasn't LeBron's kid?
I think they would definitely be different. The idea of, oh, it's an NBA father. Well, he's not the first NBA father to have an NBA son try to make the league. So there's this general expectation of, well, if this is the father, maybe he becomes a version of that, or we could see a shell of that, or some other version, whatever else it might be, and he'll turn into this guy. But the thing that's been tough to figure out is how these guys develop within certain ages, especially between, say, 17 to 23. For a lot of people, it might be better off in the league. For others, it might be better off at different college situations. Like someone like Devin Carter is a self-developed point guard and became a defensive point guard that's more prominent in the Big East. So if Bronny decides to choose that path and he sees himself as this player, he can become that guy. Now, with all this other hype, it's, oh, well, if he wants to play in the league, he's familiar with the NBA game because of LeBron, of course. He knows what the pathway is to become successful. Why doesn't he just go into the league? I mean, if I was in Bronny's shoes and that was my goal and I could see the path for myself, I would definitely be aiming for that goal as soon as I could.
So you think, if he's around a 55, that's not a politics pick for the Lakers. That's a good draft pick at 55 to be able to add a guy that you think has, mid to late, first round talent, early second round talent.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good pick. Once you get to that mid to late area of the draft, it's really difficult to see how these teams are going to draft in the first place. As we talked about earlier, we said some of these guys have a range of 15 picks, and there have been rumors about, Phoenix drafting him as high as the late first round. Well, if that's the case, then the Lakers aren't the only team considering drafting him. There's some interest from other teams as well at a higher draft spot. So whatever the case might be.
Do you think he lasts to 55? I've been thinking no of late, that he would actually be off the board at 55. If the Lakers wanted him, they might have to trade into the second to do it.
That would be one of the hardest tells for this year. That draft range between 15 to 40, I expect some of those guys to drop to 55 that I would be very, very high on. We haven't talked about them, but they are guys that, I would have him in the late first round in a typical draft anyway.
All right, I want to swing back to a few more of the players that could potentially be options for the Lakers at 17. We've mentioned him a few times, Deron Holmes. He's seems like he's got a lot of different skill sets in his bag, but correct me if I'm wrong, he's not quite a true big or somebody that would be projected as a true big in the NBA. What do you like about him? And do you think he's somebody that could find minutes this coming season and utility this season for the Lakers at his size, skill set, that sort of thing?
So the quick way for me to phrase it is I see him as the junior version or a similar archetype to, say, someone like Miles Turner. The thing is, Miles Turner is a taller player. He's got longer arms. Sure, that's fine. But why do we look at Miles Turner? He has that 3-point shooting range. He hits the glass, and he knows what he's doing on the offensive end in terms of screening and whatnot. Holmes had this role for the past 2 years, and he really stepped up his 3-point shooting this past year. I think it's mid to high 30% now. But now he's operating top of the key. Very rarely, but starting the offense, operating out of dribble handoff situations, screening for other shooters, making an extra pass to find his own teammates open in the corner. There's a lot of different aspects to his offensive versatility that I really like, where, as I mentioned earlier, regardless of the coach, it's the kind of thing that opens up a playbook and it makes him adaptable to a lot of different situations. Then there's the defensive end where he can compete as well.
Who are some of the wings that, if they were available for the Lakers, like the guys that you think could fit more 3-4 type prospects as opposed to 2-3s, like the true wings that might be available for the Lakers that you'd be interested in?
Right at 17, the Silva is really the top, but he's not listed. Well, the other player that I'm going to mention, Jalen Tyson, isn't seen as that 4-3. He's seen as more of a 3 and maybe a 2. He's just that general size, but he's more of a ball handling, triple threat wing player that can create shots on his own or out of pick and roll situations. And there's a lot of intrigue there. The last time I made a similar comparison to that was a few years ago with Jalen Williams, but Jalen Williams' shooting was a lot more obvious, and he played de facto point guard for his team. With Tyson, it's more of operating out of wing, operating out of the corners, and then creating a shot within the offense. And he was able to do that pretty much at will for the entire season.
I'll give you a few more names quickly that I've found interesting in reading up and seeing mocked near the Lakers, if nothing else. Keyshawn George, big wing. I've seen him described a lot with like very guard-like skills. What do you think of him?
So Keyshawn is someone I don't have ranked as highly. I think there's a lot of physical development that has to happen. He has great shooting touch, and it happens at all 5 corners of the 3-point line. He's able to make the passes, especially in transition. It's just someone that I think will take a little bit more time to develop long term. And if that's the case, well, you're looking for a ball handling wing. That's what we're looking for in the league. That's kind of the direction where if you're looking at if you're going for Keyshawn George.
Jacoby Walter, wing from Baylor. The Ringer recently compared him to Chris Middleton.
So Jacoby Walter, I have mixed feelings about because I'm not 100% sure, but this is what I do see. He has motor defensively. He definitely competes at the defensive end, especially at wing. He's been a motion shooter for Baylor, and the percentages don't always reflect how difficult some of those shots are. I think he has some really good technique when he goes into a shot, but as I mentioned earlier, more of the priority has leaned towards being more of that NBA ready. So I think Walter will take some time.
And then the last guy, and another guy, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, Bobby Klintman. He's been playing in the Australian NBL. He comes from Switzerland, seemed described as versatile, potential 3'4", 6'9", 210. Impressions of him?
So to me, Klintman, I just have a little bit lower down on my tier list only because the guy that I have similar to him is actually De Silva. So it's one of those things where if De Silva's at this case, well, Klintman is a similar mold. Well, I prefer De Silva for other reasons outside of shooting and defense. To add on to Klintman, he played in a tougher Australian league last year, and he has been more comfortable in terms of attacking the rim and with spot-up shooting in general. I think that's kind of what we're looking at with De Silva as well. I just see a lot more defensive capability, versatility, and some of that IQ with De Silva. So if I had a choice, that would be my preference. If not, then I would look to Tyson.
Okay, so my last question for you then is this. You are pick 37 has rolled around. The Lakers don't pick again until 45. There's somebody still on the board. You've got
55.
Right. I'm sorry, 55. You've got your $3.5 million or whatever it's going to cost this year to buy back into the second round and around that spot. Who you are rushing to the proverbial podium to make a trade to pick who? Who is that sort of sleeper guy that you are like, if he's still there mid-second round, gotta have him?
It's Ryan Dunn, and I'm going to make an explanation. He hasn't shown much range outside of being at the rim, but I put a lot of value in guys that play high-level defense. One of the guys that I think of before in a similar mold is someone like Herb Jones, who developed his three-point shooting, but the defense and motor were always there. Ryan Dunn is that level of defender. I don't even want to imagine what offensive spacing looks like. I just want to imagine what it looks like with Ryan Dunn and Jared Vanderbilt both being on the floor and the Lakers getting out in transition. So that is the guy I would look for in that mid to late second round.
He is Mike Garcia. You know him as Canyon Driver on Twitter. You find him at Lakers Draft Scouting on Substack. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on. Every year we appreciate this.
All right, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where we can go hang out, check out what the Lakers are going to do, react to it, talk to it amongst yourselves, talk about it with us. We will be back tomorrow to break it all down, get you ready for the second round, I guess, because it's a 2-day draft now. So we'll see everyone tomorrow.